U.S. Navy MH-60. Seahawk helicopters lifting off a vast expeditionary sea-based deck under a fiery sunset. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers like USS Pinckney slicing through churning waves at high speed. Dramatic zoom on a massive weathered Suezmax tanker. Rusted hull, faded Panamanian flag barely visible, smoke trailing from stacks. Overlay text flashes in bold red, High Sea Intercept. Then, the long chase, 10,000 miles of relentless pursuit. Cut to satellite imagery overlay, a red dotted line snaking across oceans. Voiceover starts urgent, gripping. While the world watches Iran's IRGC launch smart control drills right in the heart of the Strait of Hormuz, practicing closures, swarms, and live fire chaos, the U.S. Navy has just pulled off one of the boldest high seas operations in modern times. This isn't some routine patrol in distant waters. It's a direct calculated strike deep into the shadows of the global oil black market. After a grueling 10,000-mile chase that spanned 2 entire oceans, the Aquila II, a sanctioned tanker loaded with roughly 700,000 barrels of heavy Venezuelan crude, has been boarded and taken under U.S. control by American naval forces in the Indian Ocean. Today, we dive deep into the oil quarantine mission that's redrawing the rules of maritime dominance, exposing the desperate tricks of shadow fleets, and sending a clear warning to Tehran. Your evasion games aren't invisible anymore. And this intercept has the IRGC on edge, ready to push back hard. Let's set the scene properly. This story doesn't start in the warm waters near Hormuz or the Persian Gulf. It begins thousands of miles away, in the chaotic aftermath of a seismic shift in Caracas. In early January 2026, U.S. BUSS Special Forces executed a high-profile operation that captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, a move that sent shockwaves through the regime and triggered a frantic exodus of oil tankers from Venezuelan ports. Maduro's fall cracked open the floodgates. At least 16 tankers, many linked to state oil company VBSS and shadowed by sanctions, bolted for the open sea, desperate to offload their illicit cargo before the U.S. clampdown tightened further. Enter the Aquila II, IMO 9281-152, a Panamanian-flagged Suezmax behemoth, 274 meters long, capable of hauling up to 1 million barrels, but in this case, carrying about 700,000 barrels of thick, heavy crude. Owned through opaque networks with ties to Hong Kong-based entities and previously flagged for moving illicit Russian oil, this vessel was no stranger to evasion. Ship tracking data from experts like tanker trackers. Com shows it had spent much of the prior year running dark. AIS transponders switched off for days or weeks at a time. A classic dark fleet tactic to disappear from global monitoring systems. As Maduro's regime crumbled in January, the Aquila II loaded up in Venezuelan waters and slipped out, joining a desperate flotilla aiming for Asian buyers, primarily China, where discounted sanctioned crude still finds eager refineries. But President Trump's administration had already declared a naval quarantine on sanctioned Venezuelan vessels back in December 2025. This wasn't just words on paper. It was a doctrine of aggressive maritime interdiction. Track, hunt, board, and seize anywhere in international waters. The message was blunt. Defy the blockade, and international waters become your hunting ground, not your sanctuary. 2D animated map takes over screen. Start point pulses red in the Caribbean near Venezuelan coast. A thick red line traces the route, out into the Atlantic, a wide arc around Africa's Cape of Good Hope to avoid choke points, then northeast into the vast Indian Ocean. Markers pop up along the path. AIS blackout, 5+ days. Suspected ship-to-ship transfer zone. Flag hop attempt, US. Tracking icons, satellites, P-8 Poseidon aircraft, destroyer symbols. Shadow it relentlessly, closing the gap like a noose. The chase was epic in scale. U.S. Intelligence fused everything. National Reconnaissance Office satellites capturing thermal signatures and deck activity, Allied maritime patrol planes from Diego Garcia or Allied bases, surface ships picking up faint radar blips, even human-sourced tips on potential buyers. The Aquila II tried every trick, zigzagging routes to burn time, brief AIS flickers to fake destinations, possible mid-ocean transfers to obscure origins. But the U.S. Navy's persistent maritime domain awareness didn't blink. From the Caribbean, through the Atlantic, around the Cape, and deep into the Indian Ocean, over 10,000 nautical miles, they shadowed without pause. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth put it plainly on X. It ran, and we followed. The Department of War echoed. The Department of War tracked and hunted this vessel from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean. You will run out of fuel long before you will outrun us. This wasn't hyperbole. The operation showcased unmatched global reach. Destroyers like USS Pinckney and USS John Finn providing close support. The Expeditionary Sea Base, USS Miguel Keith, acting as a forward lily pad for helicopters in the Indopacom theater. The boarding happened overnight on February 9th, 2026 in international waters, roughly $200, 300 nautical miles off Oman, near the approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, but safely outside territorial limits. No shots fired, no casualties reported. A right of visit maritime interdiction under UNCLOS Article 110, justified by suspicions of sanctions evasion, stateless-like operations from flag hopping, and contraband cargo. U.S. teams fast-roped from helos, secured the deck, took the helm with a prize crew, and steered the vessel toward adjudication. The Aquila II now sits in U.S. custody, fate pending, likely forfeiture and oil resale under programs to fund enforcement. This wasn't isolated. Since December 2025, at least 7 other tankers linked to Venezuela have been seized or boarded. The Aquila II chase stands out as the longest, proof that the oil quarantine has teeth. Shadow fleets, pioneered by Iran for its own sanctioned exports to China, adopted by Venezuela and Russia, rely on anonymity, dark running, fraudulent flags, blending cargoes. By publicly hunting one down across hemispheres, the U.S. is dismantling that illusion. And Tehran is watching. Iran's IRGC Navy just kicked off smart control of the Hormuz Strait drills on February 16th. Live fire, hybrid scenarios testing closure tactics against security threats. Why the timing? Because shadow tactics overlap. Iran sells oil the same way, dark, evasive to the same buyers. Hitting a Venezuelan-linked vessel sends a dual message. Your networks aren't safe and escalation risks are rising. The high seas just became a battlefield. And this long chase is only the opening move. Why did the U.S. Navy pull the trigger on February 9th, 2026 to board the Aquila II after that epic 10,000-mile hunt? Timing in this high-stakes game is never coincidence. It's the heartbeat of the retaliation cycle, a dangerous spiral of probes, responses, and escalations between Washington and Tehran that's been simmering since the Trump administration's return. The Aquila II seizure wasn't random. It was a calibrated counterpunch in a broader shadow war over oil, nukes, and maritime control. Rewind to the diplomatic front. In early February 2026, indirect nuclear talks mediated by Oman kicked off in Muscat. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called the first round a good start, with discussions on uranium enrichment limits, sanctions relief, and de-escalation. Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi described them as very serious, but no breakthrough emerged. Tehran showed some flexibility on enrichment caps, but held firm on core demands: full sanctions lift, no missile program curbs. Washington pushed hard for a verifiable rollback of Iran's near-weapons-grade stockpile. By February 6th and 7, talks wrapped without concrete progress, setting up a second round in Geneva. President Trump, in interviews, expressed cautious optimism but warned failure could mean more carriers to the region, tighter squeezes on Iran's economy. The message was clear: diplomacy first, but military options on the table if talks collapse. Hours after the Oman talks stalled, the cycle kicked into gear on February 3rd. In the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow 21-mile choke point where 20% of global oil flows, IRGC fast boats and a Mohider drone swarmed the Stena Imperative, a U.S. flagged product tanker enrolled in America's tanker security program, critical for military fuel logistics. Reports from UKMTO and CENTCOM detail the harassment. Multiple IRGC vessels hailed the ship, ordered it to heave to, shut engines, and prepare for boarding and seizure. The captain refused, ramped up speed, and continued transit. USS McFall, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer nearby, moved into escort. The IRGC backed off. Situation de-escalated. Tanker proceeded safely. Almost simultaneously, farther out in the Arabian Sea, a Marine F-35C Lightning II from the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group engaged and downed an Iranian Shahed 139 drone. CENTCOM statement: the drone approached aggressively with unclear intent, closing on the carrier about 500 miles from Iran's coast. The F-35 shot it down in self-defense to protect the ship and crew. No casualties, but oil futures jumped over 1 barrel on the news. Iran called it provocation. U.S. tense sound effects build. This cluster of events on Feb 3 created the perfect storm for the intelligence gap to close. U.S. Intel had been tracking the Aquila II for weeks. NRO satellites spotting deck activity and thermal signatures, AIS anomalies from brief flickers, P-8 Poseidon patrols picking up radar tracks, Allied tips on shadow fleet buyers in Asia. The tanker fit every red flag. Sanctioned, OFAC listed John 2025 for Russian oil links but carrying Venezuelan crude post-Maduro capture, running dark, Flag hopping, Panamanian cover for opaque Hong Kong ownership, part of the evasion network Iran pioneered for its own exports to China. But why act precisely then? Escalation management. Direct confrontation in Hormuz, like seizing an Iranian tanker, risks immediate blowback, mines, swarms, closure threats. Instead, the U.S. struck asymmetrically. A Venezuelan-linked shadow vessel in distant international waters, 200-300 nm off Oman, Indo-Pacific Command AOR. Legal justification, UNCLOS. Article 110, right of visit. The warships can board in international waters if suspect statelessness, sanctions evasion, or contraband. The Aquila II's dark ops and evasion made it fair game, no shots, no casualties, without incident, per Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's ex-post. It ran, and we followed. This fits the retaliation cycle perfectly. Iran probes with harassment, Stina imperative, and drones near Lincoln. U.S. responds indirectly, hitting shared shadow fleet tactics far away, low risk, high signal. Tehran mastered dark fleets for sanction-busting oil sales. Venezuela, Russia adopted them. Crushing one vessel publicly dismantles the ecosystem, squeezes Iran's revenue indirectly. Animated cycle graphic, arrows loop, Iran harassment, U.S. drone down, stalled talks, distant seizure, IRGC drills ramp up, map, zoom to Hormuz. 20% global oil transit highlighted. And Tehran responded fast. On February 16th, right as this video drops, IRGC Navy launched smart control of the Hormuz Strait drills, combined intense live-fire exercises testing operational readiness, logistical plans, mine-laying sims, swarm attacks, missile scenarios against mock threats. Under IRGC Chief Mohammed Pakpour's supervision, it's framed as defending against security and military threats, exploiting Iran's geographic advantages in the Gulf and Sea of Oman. Timing? No coincidence. Drill signal? Push our oil networks and we can choke yours. The cycle spins, talks falter, incidents flare, distant seizures hit, drills escalate. The Aquila II boarding bridges the Venezuela crackdown to Iran warnings. Your shadow economy isn't untouchable. U.S. holds reach advantage. Iran holds choke point leverage. Next moves? Geneva talks resume soon, but with carriers positioning and drills live, the waves are getting rougher. Now we get to the heart of the operation. The moment the U.S. Navy turns tracking into takeover. This wasn't a Hollywood shootout or a chaotic raid. It was a textbook VBSS mission. Visit, board, search, and seizure. Elite maritime special ops executed with surgical precision. The Aquila II boarding on February 9, 2026, in international waters of the Indian Ocean showcased every layer of modern naval tech, training, and legal maneuvering. No casualties, no shots fired. Just overwhelming dominance that left the crew compliant and the vessel under U.S. control. First, understand the physics of interception. Tankers like the Aquila II are massive, 274 meters long, 48 meters wide, displacement over 150,000 tons when loaded. They're not agile, they're floating behemoths built for endurance, not evasion. To close in safely, the U.S. Navy uses layered assets for what experts call a lily pad forward-basing approach. The USS Miguel Keith, or Similar Expeditionary Sea Base, ESB, was the key enabler here, a 784-foot floating airfield and command hub in Indopacom's area. Its enormous flight deck supports MH-60R Seahawks or MV-22 Ospreys for extended range ops without needing a full carrier strike group nearby. ESBs act as mobile lily pads. Helicopters launch, refuel mid-mission if needed, and insert teams directly onto target decks. Arleigh Burke destroyers, USS Pinckney, USS John Finn, USS Ralph Johnson types confirmed in theater, provide the close-in muscle. High-speed dashes to parallel the tanker at 30-plus knots, using radar and electro-optical sensors to maintain position and prevent escape maneuvers. The approach phase is all about control. Destroyers position to box the tanker, one on each beam, sometimes a third astern to block retreat. Physics here is simple but critical, relative velocity matching. The tanker steams at 1214 knots. Destroyers match speed while closing from 5 to 10 nautical miles out, using surface search radar to track every turn. If the vessel ignores radio hails, as Aquila II did, multiple warnings in English, possibly Spanish, others via international channels, this is U.S. Navy warship. You are suspected of sanctions violation. Heave to and prepare for boarding. Escalation to non-compliant boarding kicks in. Animated breakdown. Step 1. Destroyer's parallel tanker helos lift off from ESB 50, 100 nanometers away. Step 2. Halos approach low and fast, hover 50 to 100 feet above deck. Cut to real gear close-ups. black fast rope coils, gloved hands gripping, M4 carbines slung. Non-compliant boarding sequence. This is where VBSS shines. Hail and final warning, bridge-to-bridge radio, visual signals, flares, lights, even loudspeaker if close. Aquila 2 ignored or evaded, engines stayed full ahead. No overt hostility, but non-compliance triggers insertion. Helicopter assault insertion, HVBSS variant. MH-60s hover low over the tanker's deck, forecastle or amidships to avoid cranes, pipes. Teams fast rope down specialized kits, thick braided ropes with knots or mechanical descenders for rapid, controlled descent from 30 to 60 feet. Gear loadout. Level 3 body armor, ballistic helmets with NVGs, M4 carbines, suppressed variants possible, Mossberg shotguns for close quarters, flashbangs, zip ties, handheld radios. Critical edition, biometric scanners, compact devices like HIDE, handheld interagency identity detection equipment, or newer DoD systems to scan fingerprints, iris, facial against watch lists for IRGC links, sanctions ties, or fugitives. Teams hit the deck in waves. First element secures immediate area, bridge access, hatches. Second sweeps for threats. Training emphasizes speed. Secure the wheelhouse first to prevent scuttling or ramming attempts. Deck secure and prize crew take over once bridge controlled. Prize crew, USIC sailors, often VBSS qualified with engineering quals, assume helm and engine control. They steer the vessel to a designated neutral-friendly port or holding area for adjudication. Crew detained humanely, zip-tied if needed, but reports stress without incident. No resistance from Aquila to Q's mariners. Search phase follows. Systematic sweeps of bridge, engine room, crew quarters, cargo tanks, non-intrusive for oil. Goal, confirm cargo, 700,000 barrels heavy crude, PDVSA linked. Document evasion evidence, fake manifests, dark running logs. If contraband confirmed, full seizure. Oil impounded vessel forfeited under U.S. programs. Visuals, step-by-step 3D animation, fast rope descent, slow-mo ropes uncoiling, boots hitting deck, team stacking at hatches, biometric scan glowing on faces, prize crew at helm turning wheel. Cut to legal graphic, unclose Article 110 icon, sanctions overlay. Legally, this holds water under international law. Sanctioned oil becomes contraband once tied to evasion, especially in zones where U.S. enforces via executive orders. The real hook. Unclose. Article 110, right of visit. In international waters, high seas beyond 12 nautical limit territorial, warships can board foreign vessels with reasonable suspicion of statelessness, piracy, slave trade, or unauthorized broadcasting. Aquila the Titan's profile screamed red flags, flag hopping, Panamanian cover for opaque Hong Kong ownership, AIS blackouts, running dark, sanctions history, OFAC listed for Russian oil, now Venezuelan. False flags or evasion make it effectively stateless-like, losing immunity. No sovereignty violation, boarding justified, minimal force used. This op wasn't brute force, it was tech dominance. Persistent surveillance, satellites P8s, ship sensors, fed real-time intel. Helos extended reach. Biometrics ensured no hidden threats. Prize crew training prevented mishaps on massive tankers. Attrition in VBSS school is high, 25-30%, but grads master compliant to non-compliant escalations, from polite inspections to forced takeovers. A montage, recap clips, helo insertion, deck secure, helm handover, overlay stats, no shots, no casualties, cargo secured. Music builds to empowering crescendo. The Aquila 2 boarding proves VBSS isn't just anti-piracy theater anymore. It's a tool for economic warfare, choking shadow fleets at sea. Precision, not destruction. Overwhelm, not overwhelm violently. This is how the U.S. Navy turns a 10,000-mile chase into a quiet victory, and why Iran's IRGC is taking notes during their smart control drills. So we've seen the chase, the intel, the tech. The Aquila 2 is now in U.S. custody. Its 700,000 barrels of sanctioned Venezuelan crude impounded, another blow to the Shadow Fleet ecosystem. But the real question isn't how it happened. It's what happens next. If the U.S. keeps seizing these tankers, and make no mistake, they just did it again with the Veronica III on February 15th, 16, tracked from the Caribbean and boarded in the Indian Ocean without incident, does Iran finally move to blockade the blockade? Are we staring down a full maritime crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, where one wrong move could spike global oil prices and drag the world into asymmetric escalation? Let's break down the stakes. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just water, it's the world's most critical choke point. Roughly 21 million barrels per day flow through its 21-mile wide narrowest point, about 1/5 of global seaborne oil trade, plus massive LNG from Qatar. Iran controls the northern shore. Its IRGC Navy has spent decades building asymmetric tools to threaten closure. Naval mines, thousands stockpiled, fast attack boats for swarm tactics, anti-ship missiles, like Noor and Ghadar variants, submarines, and drone missile hybrids. A full blockade? Tehran has threatened it before, during the 2019 tanker crisis, 2020 tensions, but never fully executed. Why? Because it would be economic suicide for Iran itself. Iran exports. Wonder one, 5 to 2 million barrels per day, mostly shadow fleet to China. Its lifeline amid sanctions. Closing Hormuz halts its own sales, devastates its biggest buyer, China, and triggers global recession-level spikes. Analysts like Bloomberg Neff warn full Iranian export disruption could push Brent to $71 a barrel in Q2 2026, or 91 plus by Q4 if prolonged. Even partial retaliation, seizing a U.S. flagged tanker like the Stina Imperative again, or harassing allies, risks tit for tat that hurts everyone. Brent sits around $68 today, up slightly on today's drills and dual carrier news, but a single major incident could send it toward $90, $100 overnight, as markets price and supply shock. Animated risk map, red arrows from Iran showing swarm boats, mines, missiles targeting Hormuz traffic, green U.S. icons, dual carriers, Lincoln Plus incoming forward, destroyers, subs. Split screen, Brent chart spiking versus Iran's oil export routes to China. Tehran's response playbook is already in motion. Today, February 16th, 2026, the IRGC Navy kicked off smart control of the Hormuz Strait drills, combined, intense, live fire exercises under IRGC Chief Mohammed Pakpour's direct supervision. These aren't routine, they're hybrid scenarios testing rapid response to security and military threats, including mine deployment, swarm attacks on mock tankers, missile barrages, and logistical readiness for choke point denial. State media frames it as defending against anti-security plots, exploiting Iran's geographic edge in the Gulf and Sea of Oman. Timing? No accident. It comes right after the Aquila 2 seizure, the Veronica 3 boarding, second in a week, stalled Oman talks, second Geneva, round today with low expectations, and U.S. carrier buildup. The U.S. holds massive advantages. The USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group is already in the Arabian Sea, off Oman per satellite confirms, providing air dominance with F-35Cs, destroyers for escort, and persistent presence. Now the USS Gerald R. Mouaddour. Ford, the Navy's most advanced supercarrier, is en route from the Caribbean, redirected after Maduro ops, expected to join within days, weeks, creating dual carrier presence for the first time in years. That's overwhelming strike power. Hundreds of aircraft, missile defenses, global logistics. Iran knows direct confrontation favors the U.S. Its strategy is asymmetric. Make any escalation too costly politically, economically. Retaliation risks are real but calculated. Past patterns: Iran seized foreign tankers. Geopolitics St. Nicholas in 2024, released recently, harassed U.S. flagged vessels. Stina Imperative Feb 3 flew drones near carriers. Shahed downed same day. A blockade the blockade move could mean mining lanes, fast boat swarms on U.S. member allied shipping, or targeting infrastructure in Saudi UAE. But experts assess low probability of full closure. It invites devastating U.S. allied response, hurts regime stability amid internal pressures. Shadow fleet hits like Aquila the squeeze Iran's revenue indirectly. Shared evasion tactics with Venezuela, Russia, without direct attack. Visual, watch items ticker, USS Gerald R. Ford transit map, Brent price, live feed spiking hypothetical to $100. Montage, IRGC boats and drills versus U.S. carriers launching jets. Fade to dramatic ocean horizon with silhouettes. Watch item 1. Track the USS Gerald R. Ford's position closely. It's transiting now to join the Lincoln Strike Group, potentially within the next week or two, doubling U.S. carrier firepower in theater. Any acceleration signals higher alert. Watch item 2. Monitor Brent crude prices obsessively. Today, our 68 barrel amid drills and talks. A single Iranian retaliation seizure, drone incident, or Hormuz disruption could ignite a spike toward 90-100 barrel overnight. Markets are already baking in a modest risk premium. Final thought. The shadow war is over. The open war for the waves has begun. This isn't just about one tanker anymore. It's a redrawing of maritime power. U.S. enforcing global reach against shadow economies, Iran flexing choke point leverage, the world holding its breath. Escalation to full crisis or calculated pressure, forcing talks. The next 48, 72 hours, with drills live, carriers converging, Geneva resuming, could decide.